Welcome to our first webinar of the new year. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. My name is David Darm. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged.
But you're two.
We are here today to provide a training webinar for those of our community transportation coordinators who are, when they submit their invoices through the Trip and Equipment Grant, we're going to give you a tutorial today on some of the features that we're going to begin the implementation starting February 1st. Before I turn it over to our team here to give you the presentation, I want to make a special thank you to our team here in Tallahassee who have put a lot of work into putting this template together, as well as the team of Thomas Howell Ferguson, Jeff Barbacci, and Casey Perkins. There's been a lot of back and forth that we've had to putting this together. So we're very excited today to present this to y'all. The way we're going to do this in the format, the goal of this new template, it's not going to be radically different than what you have been submitting. However, it's going to have some of the new features that will help identify where there may be potential errors before submission. And it will help us to being sure that when we are reviewing these invoices that we're catching any kinds of errors more efficiently. So what we'll do as far as today's format is we'll turn it over here to Casey Perkins to provide an overview and the instructions on how to use the new template. And then we will open it from there to questions that you may have. We encourage you to use the chat box feature if there is a burning question that you have to put it in there, and we'll get to that once Casey is done with his presentation. And then our goal again is to have this be an implementation starting February 1st. So this would be applied to the current January's services that are being provided. So I think I've covered anything else that I need as far as the introduction goes. We are recording this, so for those who cannot make today's meeting, we will post this recording on our website shortly after this meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Casey Perkins to give the tutorial.
Okay. Gotta turn my mic on.
You don't. You'll use this mic.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Make sure I got this up. So what I'm going to be doing is going through really just a pretty short PowerPoint. It only consists of 9 slides. And then we're going to run through the new template itself using some example data. So it looks like PowerPoint is up there. But really to just pick up from where David left off, the new template isn't really a new template so much in the sense of a new design or a new layout. That's really pretty much the same. Where it's new is in how it works. And so we'll go over that specifically. But the current invoice template, the purpose of it, and this language in this first bullet is verbatim taken from the current guidelines. It's to establish uniform procedures, standard forms, etc. So in short, it was introduced originally back in 2017 to have some standardization to the invoices that came in the CTD. Before that, they would come in all kinds of different forms. The other thing about the template is it's currently in Microsoft Excel. Excel is the most widely used spreadsheet application in the whole planet. Definitely is in state government in my experience. And that standardization, it really comprises 3 main parts. The trip invoice form, that's really the first tab in the Excel file. The second tab in the Excel file, which is the trip summary data, and then the backup material where you really kind of itemize out the individual trips and passes or bus passes for each. So with the new invoice template, like I said before, when it comes to the design, the layout, those 3 main parts, that standardization doesn't change. It's really not about that. So it's going to look the same. And in a lot of ways, it should feel the same. So what's it really about then? The changes are about helping you comply with the standardization. So when you look at the current guidelines, it asks you to put the summary numbers so that they match what the backup material has. It tells you to put the dates in specific formats. It tells you to put the times in specific formats. It tells you to fill out every field. This is what the new template is going to do through automation. It's going to really catch those things, make sure that everything's in compliance with the guidelines. And it's going to do it in a way that really, to where if there is an error or a mistake in any way, it'll bring it to your attention easily. It's not a game of gotcha by any means. It's there to help you. So starting with the first major part of the invoice template. Currently, there are 18 fields in the trip invoice tab that are filled out. So of those 18 fields, you'll notice right here, I've only got 4 of them bolded and underlined. So those are the only 4 where we're making a change from the current invoice template. So let's go with the first one where there's a change, the invoice number. The invoice number almost always just consists of the month and the grant number. So that's something that can be automated. Now there are specific instances, they're kind of rare, where it may not follow that format exactly. So this is a field that you can actually override. It's not locked by any means. The second thing that's changed is the dates of service. Instead of really just kind of typing in the dates yourself, it's really now drop-down selections. And this adjusts depending on what you choose. So for example, if you choose the month of February in the invoice template this year, you'll only be able to choose up to 28 days instead of 30 days or 31 days. If you do it during a leap year for February, you'll be able to select up to 29 days. So it does those kinds of adjustments. And the reason we made that change there is to help us with enforcing the date formats in some of the backup material. Now, the type of service provided, this is something that in the template really was you would type it in. And by type of service provided, I just mean ambulatory, wheelchair, stretcher, monthly bus pass, that kind of thing. You don't have to do anything now. It's all automated. That will populate depending on what you do in the other tabs. And like I've mentioned before, we'll go over that example. The number of units, that's something you also don't have to input. That's going to be pulled right from the summary tab, just like the type of service provided. Now, the number of units will change depending on number 9 there, the unit type you select. So if you select trip, it'll pull the trips from the summary tab. If you select mile, it'll pull the miles from the summary tab. If you select pass, it'll pull the passes from the summary tab. So those are the changes with trip invoice tab. Next, the summary data tab. You don't even have to do anything to this anymore. It's really just going to populate itself based on the backup material you provide in the other tabs. And by other tabs, I mean ambulatory, wheelchair, etc., those kinds of tabs. And this is consistent with the current guidelines. The current guidelines do state that the numbers in the summary tab should match what's in the backup documentation. So we're just making that match automatically now. You don't even really have to ensure it. Now let's go to the more technical, detail-oriented part of the invoice, the trips. And then I'll do the passes after this. So the current fields, and this is for ambulatory, wheelchair, stretcher, group per passenger tabs. These are your current fields. And really, more or less, we're going to keep them in the exact same order. The one exception is we are going to remove the cost column. There's no real need for the cost column in our view, because you determine the actual reimbursement on that first tab, the trip invoice tab. But for the remaining columns, they'll be in the exact same order as they are now. It'll look the same. But when you put your data in, like on the first one, it'll make sure that it can read it as a date. When it comes to those ones where you see it just says on the changes must have some sort of text, it'll just make sure it's not blank. So, if under name there's a blank, it's going to flag that and say, hey, it's blank. This is a field that needs to be filled out. Pickup time and drop off time, pretty similar to date. It's just going to make sure it's in the format it can read as time. So if you leave off the M on PM or AM, sometimes it won't be able to read that. A negative for a prior month. We'll go over that at the very end of the PowerPoint. But sometimes there's situations where a CTC wants to take a trip back from a previous month. And so you just put negative mileage in there. But like I said, we'll go over that example at the end, and as well as when we go through the new template. So passes, just like trips, we're keeping everything that's currently there in the same order, but we are removing cost. And it's doing the same thing. The date the pass was issued, it's going to make sure it can actually read it as a date. It's going to make sure that the unique identifier for the bus pass number and the name fields are not blank. Now, this is kind of probably one of the bigger twists on the new template, but we're going to have all the passes in one tab now. And the reason we're doing that is because, one, we can do it regardless of if it's a monthly pass, a weekly pass, etc. You're filling out the same fields. But the reason we really feel like it helps to do it this way is because, unlike trips, there's only 4 different types of trips: ambulatory, wheelchair, stretcher, group, or passenger. Unlike that, the passes really aren't standardized. There's all kinds of different passes that are possible. You can have monthly in one service area, another service area has 30 days. You can have 2 weeks in one service area, another service area has 15 days. Then you've got discounted versions of that. You've got daily passes, you got single trip passes. So by having them all in one tab, it makes it a lot easier to populate the unique passes in the summary tab, and by extension, the trip invoice tab. And that's why we're doing that. So we're at the very end of the PowerPoint now, and like I mentioned, I'll go into a little bit more depth on crediting back trips and passes. And this is a very rare thing. I mean, the overwhelming majority of CTC invoices I've looked at have never done it, but there are some pretty rare instances where it happens, where a CTC says, it'll say it's the month of December, and they're like, well, there was a trip in August, and I really shouldn't have included that trip. I want to take it back. What they typically do is they put in negative mileage, and then they deduct that from the total count. And so that's how you do that in this invoice. You just do the exact same thing. You put in negative mileage, or like the column for the passes, where I'll go back to it real quick, where it says number of passes, 1 or -1. 1 if you want the pass to count, -1 if you want it deducted. Same thing, just put -1 there. It'll deduct it from the count. Now, the -1 or the negative mileage, it does need to be associated with an earlier month from the same state fiscal year, otherwise it will flag it as an error. But if done correctly and not flagged as an error, it will highlight the row light red. And, oh, I forgot to mention this, sorry, on the last couple slides, but between the errors and the deducts, on the far right, next to the miles and the trips, and next to the number of passes on the passes tab, you'll be able to filter your rows so that you only look at the rows with errors, you only look at the rows with deducts, that kind of thing. So you don't have to scroll through hundreds, maybe even thousands of rows to find where the errors are occurring. You're able to do that, and we'll go over that in the example as well. So that's the end of the PowerPoint. Going to go now to the trip invoice tab, or sorry, the trip invoice itself, and I've already downloaded it, but CTD did put it up on their website right here where you can download it. So the exact same file. Pulling it up now. So here we are on the first tab, the trip invoice tab. And since everyone's going to be doing January, we'll go with January. Make sure I'm in there. And then I'm just going to put in some things. I'm in Leon County. We'll just say THF, Thomas L. Ferguson, CTC, just to make that up. Say 1, 2, 3, 4 Tally Way. There we go. That's this is all hypothetical, by the way. Phone number 555-555-5555, just like in the movies. All right, invoice date. Let's see, we're really on it. It's February 1st. We're coming in. Grand number, THFCP. And this is the first thing that's automated that I mentioned right there in the invoice number. you'll see it read the month, the start date, January, and then it just combined that with the grant number. That's almost always how it works. But let's say for whatever reason, this isn't going to be correct. I can just say THFCP 01B. All good. It can be overridden, like mentioned in the PowerPoint. Let's just say what, 10,000 for the monthly exhibit, not $10. All right. And now all this stuff will be automated below. So we need to get some data in there because remember, we don't even do anything on this tab. So let's pull in some hypothetical data. I've got some right here, some hypothetical trip data. It's 1,000 trips exactly. Gonna paste that in the ambulatory tab. And if everything looks good, it says 1,000 trips, 20,162 miles. Let's see if that adds up. Yep. I'm having a look at the big screen here, but yeah, see 20,162 miles, count 1,000. So it's reading it correctly in the summary tab. Let's make sure it's going over to the trip invoice tab. There's the ambulatory, it's automated. It's pulling the 1,000 trips, but if I say mile, it should pull the 20,162 miles. There it is. If I say $1 a mile, there's your amount. Now let's do the exact same data, but we'll do it in the wheelchair tab. So we can take a look at what the errors look like and how we can catch them. So we'll just scroll through this randomly. I'll take this person's name out. So that's a blank. See how the row highlights and everything turns red? It says blank error. Let's go somewhere else and let's just say we entered the date wrong. We accidentally put the next month. Date or miles error. Okay, scroll all the way down. And then let's just do pickup time. Let's say we accidentally put in an extra 0 here for the time. Oh, well, that didn't work. 1 second. See what that does. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. Hold on, let's see. In military time, let's see what happens if I say PM. There we go. So it's in military time, but I accidentally put PM on the end, so it's not able to read it. Time or miles error. Okay, so same at the very top. I've just pasted in my data. I don't actually see the errors, but I can check right here in this far right column. Just take out the blanks, keep the errors. There they are. We've got 3 errors out of 1,000. So let's go back and look at the count. You'll see the 3 with errors are not being counted. The miles came out, the trips came out. That's also reflected in this wheelchair tab. Or sorry, this trip invoice tab with the wheelchair trips. So that's what happens there. Now let's do an example of a deduct. So I'll use the exact same 1,000 trips again for stretcher. So got 1,000 stretcher trips, same mileage. But now say I want to deduct from an earlier month. All I got to do, let's just say it's this first trip. Make it negative. And I'll flag it as an error at first, but if it's from an earlier month in the same year, then it'll count as a deduct. So like I said in the PowerPoint, shaded light red, it says earlier month deduct. You can also catch that with the filter, you'll see right there. So if the count's right, we're only counting 999 trips now, but we're actually deducting 1. So our count should be 998 for the stretcher. There it is, 998. Feeds into this tab as well, in the trip invoice tab. Now let's do the passes at the very end. See how that works. Oops. So my hypothetical here on the passes, our made up example, we've got 500 passes, but look, I've got monthly passes, I've got 10-day passes, I've got weekly, yada, yada. Just gonna paste all those in. Same thing. Now the reason it's yellow and showing blank errors is because I just have to put in one pass here. Put in one, scroll down to the bottom, just kind of paste that all the way down, make sure it says one pass for each. Suddenly all the errors go away. So 500 passes. But how do they break down between all the different types of passes? Well, let's go look. Trip summary tab. Here's how they break down. Got that many monthly, that many daily, that many weekly, 10-day single trip. Also reflected in the trip invoice tab. Put in a rate. And there they go. Do the deduct real quick. Just as an example, all I gotta do is say -1 instead of 1 on the pass. And just like the trips, make sure it's from an earlier month in the year. So let's say it goes all the way back to the beginning of the year for this. So which one's that? Single trip? Yeah, 75. 75. Let's see what it was before. 77. Adds up. So that's the run through of the template. We'll take questions now, comments, that sort of thing. We'll make the PowerPoint available after this workshop as well, but I do want to just emphasize at the end, we're rolling out something new. It's a piece of software, and there's always going to be some unforeseen things. We had a lot of internal deliberations just to get to this point, but now that we're about to have it with statewide 57 different service areas, things may pop up, but we're going to be fully attentive to anything that does and help you all through it.
Casey, a couple of questions have come up. One, if you just talk through the time format and how that works, if there's, if there's different formats acceptable, does it all have to be military time? How do you do that?
Yeah, good question. In the example, I guess I could have been more explicit about it. On the pickup time, I was showing military time. And the drop-off time, it was actually AM PM. I'll just show you real quick, actually. And that was really just so you could see. I should have mentioned it, like I said. So see how it says AM, 7 AM. And here it's just military time. See how it's like 20 right there, and then 9:15 PM. You can do it either way, as long as it's in a format that it can read as time. And we made it to where it can be virtually any format. It just has to make sense. It's got to be convertible to time in some way. Then it should be okay. But I will point out, in the current guidelines, it is pretty explicit about what the format should be for time as well as dates. So the dates, it's very specific there. Look, month/date/year in this format, 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, 4 digits for the year. Pickup time, it asks you to do it in AM PM format. Now, this new template, it's not being that strict. Like I said, you can put in military time. You can actually type out the date where it says, Saturday, the 5th of November, whatever, and it'll still read that. It just has to be in something that makes sense to the spreadsheet.
Hopefully that answered that question, but if there's any follow-up, go ahead and just type in the chat. Or I can,
And if somebody's having trouble with getting the time format or a date format to read correctly by the spreadsheet, those are the types of things we're here to help with over the next month.
right.
Yeah.
Another question dealt with the address format. And the question was, do we still need to separate out the date? And I assume that we're talking about address from city. Is that accurate? And Ashley, if you want, you could just unmute and ask that question.
Yeah, that one.
I'm not doing a good
You
job.
might just need some clarification.
Ashley, you there?
Or she can retype.
The question is, do we still have to separate the address? So maybe just talk about the address fields and what we're looking for and how we need that to come in.
Yeah, really, to go back to the PowerPoint and then I'll just go back to, the actual template itself, but for the addresses, that's just a text field. So really, for origin address, destination address, same thing with the cities, same thing with the names. It's really just checking to make sure they're not blank. And so, like I said, this spreadsheet, it's not going to solve every problem or every issue that can potentially happen with an invoice. But it does take care of some things that we think will help the whole process to go a lot smoother. But when it comes to addresses, it's just making sure that field's filled in.
So, yeah, that was the question, if we need to separate the address into street and city and
No, everything in one cell.
they go one cell.
So, yeah. So, yeah, like for instance, I'll just do it right now, like right here, 1, 2, 3, 4 Tallieway, no need to separate 1, 2, 3, 4 from Tallieway.
Right.
Put it all in one.
But you would have the
cities separate, yeah.
right, and the street address would be a separate field, the city would be a separate field.
Yep. Yeah. So again, same layout as the current template.
And then would the address need to start with a number, or can it use common names? If it's Walmart US 41, is that okay?
It's just going to make sure it's not blank.
That's right. So there you go. That's our, if it's blank, you're gonna get a blank error. Other than that, if that's the.
So I'll do that right now.
Yeah.
Walmart. All good. But blank, not good.
Karen did respond, though, it should start with the address number wherever possible, not common names.
Yeah.
And those are the questions so far. You want to just talk about if we're downloading, you had already prepared the data, so it was easy to cut and paste into the template.
Mhm.
You want to talk about what you might want to do if you're importing from the billing system, look at those headers and just, that's what you'd want to have your download or whatever you're going to use to cut and paste in the system format.
Yeah, I mean, when you're gonna paste, I mean, you just need to make sure it's in the right order. In fact, when I was putting together the hypothetical data, it was out of order and it flagged everything right away. But you just need to make sure that it's in this order, date, name, etc. That's it.
Looks like Ashley has her hand raised.
Okay.
So unmute her.
Still,
Ashley, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got disconnected when you guys asked me the question. My question was, like, if it says Walmart and then the address, do we need to separate those?
let's see a couple of questions. Let's see, do you want it sorted in a specific sorted order, date, last name, date, and last name? Seth, I'm gonna let you ask that question. I'm gonna unmute yourself, please. And then Ashley will ask you to do the same.
Yeah, for the sorting, can we,
I mean, you could
does
do
it
that.
matter what order we put them in there? Like if I have 3 different agencies and they just get put in there, is there a certain specific way you want them sorted? You want them sorted by last name, by date, or by date?
Seems
by
like they
last
may
name?
not be able to unmute.
Well, you can just keep reading to me.
Yeah.
So what's the next one?
Just looking at the settings. Everybody should be able to unmute themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot, yeah. Okay, so let's see, you mentioned the invoice is available. Download, we also be sending them out via email, not may have the address to pull off.
So I recommend downloading it from the website. And we'll go over that actually at the end. I'll go into the 32-bit thing.
Okay,
But yeah, we can just send a link to the download. Just send a link to your CTD site, dude.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, we'll provide a link.
we'll provide the link to download.
You'll be able to do that. And then going back to Seth, I'm assuming that this is a question regarding the columns within the template, if we wanted to sort it in a specific order. date, comma, last name, comma, date and last name. Not sure I understand that question completely, but,
Yeah, I would say the only sorting that matters is at the top here. Date on the far left, then to the right of that name, then
You
to the
guys
right
hear
of
me?
that mode, and then so on. That's the only sorting that matters.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. The dates don't have to be in any particular order, neither do names, that kind of thing.
yeah, okay, sorry, yeah, I don't know why we're unable to mute or unmute, but, question was that there are minor changes made, will we be notified of changes or will we be relied on to download each month? Right now, we'll let you know if there are changes, so if you download that invoice template once, you should expect you can use that each month. If there are changes made to it, we'll communicate that to you along with what changes were made.
Yep,
Hi, this is Ashley. Can anybody hear me?
yeah, we'll keep the link consistent.
Hello?
Any other questions? Anybody has? Hopefully this is something that will make the process easier.
Right, and
So-
just to say that if you all have, as you're working through it individually, and you have issues, please feel free to reach out to your respective project manager on our team. And then we can walk you through it, if we need to.
Okay, are we muted? Is that why?
We are not muted.
No, is our mic?
All right.
They're saying they can hear us.
Okay,
Oh, is your audio
Is our audio?
off? Because we've been talking.
We have, okay.
Can anybody hear me now?
Ashley, go ahead.
there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I had a question, like if it was Walmart and then the address, do we have to separate that? Did you hear me? Can you hear me? If it was like Walmart and then the address. I don't know what.
Checking to make sure it's not blank.
Can you repeat the answer to her question? Your mic was muted.
Yes, it's totally fine to say, for instance, Walmart and then have the address. I've seen that before in invoices and it's totally fine. It's really just helping us understand where the location was. But again, this new template, it's just making sure the address field is not left blank ever. That's really the only check it does for that. So it's perfectly fine to say Walmart space dash whatever, and then the address.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your patience with that, with the audio issues there. Any other questions?
Is there a better way to calculate the hours associated with the spreadsheet? Because sometimes they don't really come over as straight hours, or they come over as negative hours, or the values aren't because the times don't come through. Is that part of this template?
I might have to see specifically what
I
you're.
think are you asking about the calculation of the length of the trip? Like how many hours the trip was, or based on the start and end date or time?
Yes. Is that part of this template as well, or is that something that we're just gonna have to weed out on our own?
Yeah, that's not really part of this. But we can certainly help with that if it's causing any issues. I mean, that's something we'd like to take a look at. We don't want to cause any more trouble.
Yeah. This template is not calculating the length of the trip.
No, it's not.
but we do use that for data analytics based on the detail of the invoice. So
Yes.
if you are having trouble with that, let us know. We'd like to work with you.
Okay.
Any others? So it looks like we got our volume or the microphones working. So if there are any other questions, I think you just go ahead and ask them.
Is my screen not being shared still?
No, you're being sure. No, you're sure.
No, your screen's not shared.
Okay. You want me to go over the 32-bit thing, dude?
Yep. Okay.
I'll just do that to end it.
All right. No other questions? Casey's gonna go ahead and move on with the last bit of the presentation.
Just share my screen though. There we go. Not letting me share now.
Okay.
Okay. All right, just one last thing before we go, because this is something we ran into internally. And it's just something I want y'all to be aware of in case y'all run into it. But most of you, I'm pretty sure, use Microsoft Office 64-bit. There's two versions. There's 64-bit and there's 32-bit. 64-bit is now the default. So if you download Microsoft Office in the last few years, by default, you have 64-bit. And this won't be an issue at all. Now, if you do have 32-bit, it can still work. In fact, everything I've just done here today, going through the examples, it's all been with the 32-bit version. But sometimes if you do have a 32-bit version and you're messing with the date here, it'll simply just, this pop-up will come up, Excel ran out of resources, that kind of thing. So if any of you run into that, I'm sure it's because you have 32-bit Microsoft Office. And I just want you to know that that's something we can absolutely help you with. But again, for the overwhelming majority of you, it shouldn't be an issue. I mean, almost everybody has 64-bit Microsoft Office. So
if you do run into that error, who should they contact, Casey?
well, I mean, that's up to you.
That, I would say, talk with your project manager for your region. And then we will, work as a team to try to help you address that issue.
All right.
It's a very easy fix, actually. So
But just like what Casey said at the beginning, this is, a software, being that there'll be things that we may find down the road that we didn't realize. We did it ourselves internally, had to have several back and forth. So if that comes up, let us know and we can work through it and see how to help address it. So, but we do appreciate all the work that's gone into this so far to try to make our lives a little easier and more efficient when we're reviewing these. So, is that anything else we need to?
There was a question, well, one thing, going back to the name of the location, I think the preference from FCTD, and David, you certainly can correct me if I misstate this, but the preference is to use a street address, not the location name wherever possible. So
First, try to keep it consistent.
yeah, keep it consistent. And then the other question that was here was, will the cells in the template be unlocked on the ambulatory, wheelchair, and group or passenger tabs starting 2-1? We were trying to test it out and they were locked.
so I'll pull it up. Am I still sharing?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. So the way all of these are, this is the same with the other trip tabs and passes tab. Everything's locked except for where you can input the data. So from A3 right here, this cell, I can't go up. You'll see I tried to go up, it knocked me all the way down to that row. Can't go up. and I can't go beyond miles. I just keep going over, it keeps taking me back to A. So, yeah. This is all locked, everything outside really, this window right here. If there's a need to unlock it, that's something I would say you can work on the project managers with. Is that fair, David?
Yeah, we'll have a conversation
Okay.
about it.
But even though this column's locked, I will point out, you can still filter the rows like I was doing earlier. So you're still able to do that.
Okay. Looks like that was it on the questions. Anything else or any other comments, David or from Casey? Their views?
That's it.
Okay.
Just thanks to everyone to being here and you know, testing it out yourselves and asking good questions. So we look forward to rolling this out in a few weeks, and we'll just keep monitoring how it works. So,
All right.
all right.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Good day.